For this special edition panel for PBEC members, I am joined by Ben Delo, the co-founder of 100x, the holding company and better known for being the co-founder of BitMEX platform, and also the recently appointed chairman of 100x, Dr. David Wong, and Leo Weese, who is the chairman of the Hong Kong Bitcoin Association. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me. Ben, I'll start with you. How would you define Bitcoin at the moment?
I would define Bitcoin as a protocol. It's a protocol for ways that computers can speak to each other, and if you all speak the same protocol, you make a network. This network then has certain emergent properties that you can agree on the state of the system. You can agree in a distributed, decentralized way the state of the system, and from that build a ledger, and from a ledger you can build transactions and a currency that is then a currency that can be used to transact with, and it has no central issuer and it has no centralized control. And then once you have this currency, on top of it you can use it for trade, as a store of value, as a medium of exchange, and build businesses on top of it.
Leo, would you agree with that, or would you add or?
I think what makes Bitcoin really unique, though, is that it has the potential to be money, and that it can function as money, and that people see value in it. And that value, despite not being backed by anything, can also not be taken away by everybody. So we have a way to store funds and transact conveniently among anybody in the world, no matter if human or machine, without anybody being able to intervene in that. I think that's what makes it really unique and special.
And I think people talking about intrinsic value is a bit of a misnomer. Gold trades at 20 times its intrinsic value, but no one has a problem with that. So the value is what you can spend it on or what you can use it for.
And it's quite important that Bitcoin does not have any intrinsic value. If it had intrinsic value, that could be taken away, and that intrinsic value would then be its weak point.
For me, I think
perception as well, David.
Perception. Yeah, perception. I think for Bitcoin, I mean,
as cloud of uncertainty, isn't it?
As an investor, I look at it as an alternative investment. And looking at the global situation right now, I mean, interest rates at zero, and some countries at negative interest rate as well. And what is the cost of holding an alternative asset? And I think I see a lot of potential there.
What about the idea, leverage liquidity against security and compliance as a whole Bitcoin perception? Is that misleading for me to say that, or is that accurate?
I don't think Bitcoin is an investment, or I don't think Bitcoin is an asset in that asset management perspective. It doesn't create any returns. It's just an accounting mechanism. And in the same way that money is just an accounting mechanism, we wouldn't invest in money. We loan our money to the bank, and the bank then invests it in projects, or the bank loans it out to people who are investing. But when we hold Bitcoin, we are either trying to store some value, or we're speculating on some event in the future. And most of us are speculating on this becoming wildly accepted as money.
Do you think it will be?
Bitcoin is going to become more and more adopted and accepted and used. It's a global collateral that can be used internationally.
How fast is that adoption at the moment? Do you think it's facing a lot of challenges, for example, or do you think it's?
I think the more macroeconomic uncertainty in the world, the more people are looking to exit the traditional financial system, and Bitcoin is just one solution to that. So the more disruption worldwide, the more that the US dollar or the global financial system crumbles, the more people will be using Bitcoin.
He's smiling.
Well, I think as an investor, you look for alternative, right? And especially now with all the central bank is bringing press. Everyone is bringing money. And then when investor lost confidence, they look for alternative. And I think this is a perfect time for Bitcoin to really journey this growth trajectory.
I think David sees Bitcoin as an investment or an alternative investment, and I would agree that it is a good investment because it's uncorrelated with nearly every other asset class. But I think we miss something, because it's not only an investment, it's actually a tool. It has utility. It is a way of storing wealth, carrying wealth that can't be stolen from you in a way that traditional systems can. So I think that's where its true value lies.
But it's also a high risk investment, isn't it? Or is it not?
It's very high risk. Right. It's very speculative. The idea of
that's quite scary in these times, isn't it?
The idea of a global computer network replacing central banks is still a rather crazy idea. But as David was saying, we are undermining our global accounting mechanism, the US dollar or the US dollar banking system. And it's not just people who are afraid of their savings being devalued, or companies afraid of not being able to properly price their products in the future, but it's entire corporations and countries being afraid of being locked out of that transfer mechanism, and that means starvation, that means poverty, and nobody wants that as the only option for their future. Everybody wants to have an alternative, and even if Bitcoin is currently not wildly used, it is definitely showing the promise of being that accounting mechanism or that payment mechanism in the future for when there's nothing else that you can use.
Ben, very high risk.
It's a volatile asset, so it's high risk. I wouldn't recommend people
But
put
think
their
of it,
savings into it.
if this really takes off as global money, then the upsides are so insanely large that it very much explains the current volatility. If this can be the money that, let's say, only 100 million people use, or only 10 of the 100 largest corporations use, then it's still worth millions of US dollar per Bitcoin. And if we have this information that potentially it can go up 100x, or potentially it stays at where it is or collapses, then we do have massive amount of liquidity as this information is slowly priced into the market.
I think the thing to really for cryptocurrency, I would say, not just Bitcoin alone, right, is really about how to get the access, utilization, and also the storage. I think for us to really go mainstream, I think that's key. And then this process, and also you look at different central banks, for instance, the People's Bank of China, they are creating their own digital currency, digital RMB. And that push, I think, is also going to accelerate the market awareness of this alternative asset, I would say. But I think, of course, there are certain technicality need to be overcome for us to really make it to the mainstream.
What's the next big leap, David, then?
I think the important thing is really how to engage all our stakeholders. First thing, our clients, and the one that's trading on our platform, and how best we can create that trading experience that they say, well, we provide the right liquidity at a fair price, and they know that they will get the money that that if they make a profit, they will get the money delivered. I think that's important, the security and also the trust in the system.
And how far away are we from that at the moment, do you think?
I think we are pretty good in terms of what we are today, but I think we can do better in terms of newer products and also in terms of assessing the institutional client base. I think that's important because as you know, crypto started, it's very active in Asia. You look at the Asian risk appetite for this asset class is huge. You look at Korea, 65% of Korean stock trading is by retail investor, and 85% in China is by retail investor.
Why is that risk appetite much stronger?
Because in Asian, the trading mentality is ingrained in them, and compared to the West, for instance. Look at US, the stock holding for institutional investors, 62% is the other way around. So I see great potential.
Leo, your mission is to foster and promote Bitcoin in Hong Kong, educate all stakeholders, private, public and governments to benefits and risks of Bitcoin. What are you hearing in terms of the biggest concerns and the most praise?
The biggest concern is by far whether the government will be able to accept this eventually. Any government. Hong Kong government's decision will be dependent on how the People's Bank of China thinks, how other large industrialized nations around Hong Kong think, and eventually this will get adopted because others adopt it. You take something as payments because you know you're going to be able to pay others with it. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, and it's by far the most difficult to comprehend that governments are going to accept or use or even just sanction a payment method that is difficult to trace, that is difficult to seize, and that they cannot inflate. Yet at the same time, these properties are also what makes it so interesting to often the very same people. So this is often something that people are using in spite of their fear of the government being able to eventually crack down on it or provide a better alternative.
In spite of, so you began this because in 2014, April,
yeah,
right? So in that time, a lot's happened. Do you think there's been more concerns in that time, or the concerns have eased off? Because with it, of course, comes all the social media frenzy and all the concerns and leveraging everything else.
In 2014, there were much larger risks compared to today. People still very much believe that the government will eventually make this illegal. When Bitcoin reached $1,000 per coin for the first time, people were absolutely convinced that this would become illegal, both in China and the United States. And none of this has happened. At the same time, people in 2014 believed that this will almost immediately become the dominant form of payment on the internet, and that hasn't happened in the last 6 years either. So we've seen a lot of overstatement and understatement in the kind of expectations of how people react and adopt this. And today people are a lot more sober in their expectations. They don't necessarily expect this to replace the US dollars in the next 5 years. But at the same time, they do know that it's still going to be around in 5 years, and it's still going to hold value, and it's still going to be a reliable way of transmitting.
Why are you so passionate about it?
I do think it's
What pulled you
something. It's one of these innovations that only occur once in a generation, or even once in a century. This blows my mind on a lot of different levels. It's a computer network that we do not know how to turn it off. None of us would be able to explain to you how we can turn Bitcoin off. We've never seen that before.
I certainly couldn't, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's not just a network, or not just a protocol, or not just money, but it's also a community and an industry. And it tends to inspire, I think, quite positive change in people. The Bitcoin does come with certain promises, socioeconomic promises, political promises, technological promises, but all of them are very positive in their expectations. They're pointing a very utopic picture of the future, and I feel very much drawn to that, especially in a world where we talk about the downfall of empires, and where we talk about infectious diseases. I do think that gave me a lot of hope, and in a justified way too.
Ben, all began on a roof bar with Arthur. 3-hour drink. How many pints were drunk in the 3 hours, remember?
Well, I can't remember how many we had to drink, probably a couple of pints.
A couple of pints.
But I do remember the enormity of the challenge that Arthur posed, which was, could you build an entire derivatives exchange, including the position keeping, the order matching, the pricing, the indices, the settlement, the clearing, and the blockchain integration.
So when you arrived for the conversation with him, you weren't expecting that?
Well, I thought that he wanted me to build just the exchange, not also the brokerage, the settlement house, and the clearing facilities. And one of the beauties of Bitcoin is that it's permissionless innovation. You don't need to get anyone's permission, you can just start building on top of it. And if it's a good product, people will use it. And so you have this marketplace of ideas, free from the bureaucratic constraints or the established institutions that may want to keep competitors out.
Obviously, you're passionate about it. Is this kind of your biggest labour of love, a passion project? I mean, how would you describe the Ben take on it?
I think Bitcoin is absolutely unique and probably a once-in-a-generation technology that's come along and disrupted. The internet was one of them, and by building BitMEX, we built on top of a new technology, and in our own small way built part of the ecosystem. But I think Bitcoin is bigger than just exchanges. That Bitcoin is a payment mechanism. It's a community. It's a political statement.
Now, Ben, interesting, because I mean, you were born during the miners' strike. So for those who are not aware of the northern of England, that was an enormous disruptive change, voice of change, and you're born into that. Do you feel that there's a sort of element of Ben the risk taker, Ben the voice of change?
I was born in Sheffield during the miners' strike, but I was not out there myself.
Absolutely, baby.
But I think I was born into a period of social upheaval and economic change. This was around the time of the Big Bang deregulation of the markets in London, part of Thatcher's reforms. And I think Bitcoin is a continuation of deregulation, that you originally had a small number of people who were appointed to decide how people could trade, what they could trade with, and how they could transact. And Bitcoin is a tool for us upturning the apple cart and building our own freedoms.
Arthur has said that your quest is to, well, one of the quests, develop a fair, transparent, efficient, and highly secure platform. David, how close are you to achieving that?
I think that is vitally important in really building the credibility, and also in terms of the trust. I think trust and fairness for clients is very important.
How did the conversation go with Ben that you joined and signed on to be?
I think the motivation to join BitMEX is really, I see a tremendous potential in this platform, and also in the very early stage of development, because Bitcoin, for instance, and the crypto world only started 10 years ago, slightly longer than 10 years ago, right? And so coincidentally, it's also coincide with the smartphones revolution. So I can really link the two up together that, well, this is perhaps a new way of doing business, a new way of living, a new way of spending our money, a new way of storage as well, and a new way of asset management. So I see that potential there, and how I use my financial background, the banking background, to see how can we transfer that customer experience into the crypto world so that it's reliable, it's trustworthy, it's fair, and how to engage the regulator in a fruitful manner, because that's important. That to bring in all the stakeholders on one page, that we want to make a better world, we want to create a better world together. So let's walk this journey together. I think that's really what I want to do.
Ben, when I asked about a fair, transparent, efficient, and highly secure platform, David's very confident of getting to that. How close do you think BitMEX is? That's a huge goal to achieve, isn't it?
It's a huge challenge, and BitMEX was born in the time of a failure of a number of other Bitcoin exchanges. That we're a third generation exchange. The first generation, like Mt. Gox, had terrible security. The second generation exchanges couldn't even add up. And so we built BitMEX in the shadow of these fallen exchanges, and security of funds was incredibly important. And I think to this date, I think nearly every single one of our competitors have been hacked and lost customer funds, and we haven't, because we take it incredibly seriously. And indeed, we believe that security trumps convenience. So although Bitcoin is a 24/7 platform network that lets you move funds around 24/7, we do not let customers withdraw their funds more than once a day. We have a manual process for ensuring that if a system is hacked, the Bitcoin does not walk out the door. As for fairness and transparency, we're one of the first to publish all our market data for free in real time via WebSocket streams. We publish the details of our insurance fund, about our open interest, about everything in real time, without any skewing or misleading modifications to it. So we've tried through the last 5-6 years to just keep doing the same thing and do it well.
How do you think you're going to go about achieving, attracting more institutional money as opposed to retail? What's your goal? Because that's the plan, isn't it? Because if you attract more of that money, credibility grows over time.
I think amongst retail, we have no problem with credibility, because we've been around the industry for 5 years. Bitcoin's only been around for 10, 11 years, so we're considered very, very well-known institutional, a well-known brand. For attracting institutions themselves, they're more interested maybe in our corporate governance, in regulation, in the structure of our processes, our procedures, our KYC and AML policies. These are very different questions that our retail clients might ask. They're more interested in how tight our spreads are, what products we offer, what the leverage is like. Institutions think differently. But I think that the nature of our business and the products we've built, we're able to cater to both these, and ultimately as an exchange bring together these two markets.
One of the biggest successes, Ben, is the perpetual swap product. Tell us about that, how it's morphed, developed, and will grow.
So the BitMEX perpetual swap product was born out of clients wanting to trade futures and derivatives on the price of Bitcoin versus US dollar, but a future needs an expiry date, and on that date, all positions are closed and settled at the index price. And what customers wanted was the ability to have high leverage and trade a product that looked very much like the underlying index. Futures trade at a premium, which is called basis, and the longer the expiry date, the bigger the basis. The clients didn't understand this, so we started doing shorter and shorter dated futures until we eventually got down from a 1 month to a weekly, down to even a daily expiring future. This gave the clients the product they wanted, but it only lasted for a day. So we started brainstorming. Arthur and I were in a taxi in Shanghai, and we started asking the question, what happens if a future never expires? Now, unfortunately, mathematically, if expiry date is in infinity, then the price of the future is infinity. So we had to start thinking about how we could bake into this product a kind of an interest rate or a funding payment between longs and shorts to act as the basis while still keeping positions open. And after much financial innovation, and we implemented a Bitcoin overnight rate to assess the borrow rate in the markets, we launched in 2016 the Bitcoin US dollar perpetual swap, which looks just like the Bitcoin US dollar price, trades just like Bitcoin US dollar, has a daily funding rate that's set dynamically by the market. And this has given clients the leverage and the liquidity they've wanted, and has now grown to become our flagship product and trades around $1 billion a day.
How was it received when it was launched, Leo?
People were quite open to new ideas at that time. People were almost expecting cryptocurrency companies to come up with new things and not just emulate what's already in the market. I think what made it most attractive, which is also quite relevant to what we see this year in retail money playing around or investing, is that you couldn't really lose more than you put in. Meaning that if you bought a Bitcoin, put that into your account, and placed bets on the future price of Bitcoin, you couldn't really lose more than that one Bitcoin. But you could also use that fund to more or less lock in your balance in a US dollar term, or you could also get the price exposure of buying 10 or 20 Bitcoins with just that one Bitcoin. And people found that very attractive at that time. And I think that's why this product has been copied so often, and that's why this business model has been copied so often.
So when you hear it being copied, how does it make you feel?
Well, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
Great quote.
And what we've actually done is we've created an entirely new market. No one knew they wanted a swap product. We had to design it, build it, and offer it to the market, and it took off. And so we've created a whole new ecosystem of products of that type.
When you hear 100 times leverage, it's quite a scary headline. And it's only a headline, isn't it? Because really it's about 8.5 times, if I'm right. Arthur was saying on an interview on CNBC, it was about 8.5 times. He said 100 times is a headline, but it's a very effective headline. But actually leverage is really not the major concern, because as you were saying, Leo, it's like, whatever you do is balanced against losses.
So 100x is an advertising headline, and 100x doesn't mean your position is made 100 times bigger. It actually means your margin requirement is 100 times smaller. So if you take the reciprocal, you get 1%. So what that means is for a 1% margin requirement, you can open that position, and you can only lose that 1% you put in. And as Leo was saying, it's limited liability. You cannot lose more than you put in. So what a lot of people do is they'll use leverage so that they keep their own Bitcoin safe in their own wallet, and they transfer in a small percentage onto a trading platform and use that to trade with. They leverage it back up to their initial notional, thus reducing their counterparty risk with the exchange.
You also brought in the ADL system to protect traders, correct? So why did you do that? No one else do that? Because that's quite effective as well, isn't it?
Because we have limited liability, it means we don't sue our customers and they can't lose more than they've put into the system. Ultimately, a derivatives platform is net zero. Every profit must be balanced with a loss. However, you can't lose more than you put in. Therefore, there has to be a mechanism for handling the situation where you have sudden market movements, liquidations, and more losses than profits. In this situation, most exchanges have settled on a system called socialized losses. And there's many ways of doing this. You can tax people's profits, or you can close out positions early. The approach we've taken with ADL is to, on a transparent method, rank all positions based on how highly leveraged they are and how much profit they've made. And in the event of an ADL, which is incredibly rare, we've not had ADL on our platform for 2 years, in the event of ADL, those who are most highly geared and highly speculative would have their positions closed out in a profit first to ensure that the losses from liquidations are halted.
We hear all of this, but we also hear, of course, a perception. Recently, Elon Musk on Twitter, of course, was hacked, but that's a kind of tweet story, but still Bitcoin was in the headline. Do you think Bitcoin, Ben, gets a bad press? Simple as that.
I think Bitcoin is misunderstood. It's a new technology. It's very hard to explain. It's very new and very young, and so it's very hard for the press to report on it. And indeed, it's better to write a story about the price crashing or it being used for illegal purposes than it is to actually talk about all the different companies that are being built or technologies that are being built on top of it. And the EU itself released a report a couple of years ago showing that they believe over 98% of all uses of Bitcoin are lawful and legitimate, whereas only 80% of the euro are.
Why is that though? Do you think that people are scared of taking on Bitcoin? Is it more fear of the unknown, or is it just jealousy, or what is it? A threat?
It's a new and upcoming threat. So it's people's natural reaction to be defensive and to not understand.
I don't think so. I don't think of it so much as a threat as something that just fundamentally changes the
Well, it's
equation.
new, isn't it? It's new, so it is a threat.
It's new and it changes the equation, and who wants to engage with that, right?
I think really the industry itself need to better sell ourselves as what we are doing. I think it's really engaging the investing public, engaging the trading public, so that they understand what really Bitcoin is and the ecosystem surrounding the whole thing. And I think that's where we can create that legitimacy in terms of a new asset class, So I think the thing I would encourage more market players is really to engage the press proactively, the regulator proactively, and also all the stakeholders, so that they have a better understanding of what we do. And if they don't understand, then ignorance is something that, if they don't understand, they say, this thing must be bad, So I think that education process, investor education, I think is vital. The more we can actually articulate, our whole risk management system, then the security of the system, the better it is. So to me, it's a journey of mutual engagement, and we walk the journey together.
Absolutely. I think it's a two-way street, one of educating regulators as we come under the new regime. I built BitMEX to be a better exchange, to be 24/7 and not have arbitrary breaks between the close of business one day and the start of business the next day. I also built it so that the trade was the settlement. There wasn't all these clearing risks. The trade literally is the settlement. You get the realized P&L immediately. We built it so that the storage system kept our clients' funds very secure.
That's fair.
It's quite difficult for regulators, especially financial regulators, to engage with something that doesn't depend on their legal regulation or doesn't depend on their contracts. I think Bitcoin is quite amazing in the fact that it doesn't have a single contract to exist. There's nothing that really defines it. And yet, that also makes it very difficult to engage with it from a regulatory perspective, because you'd have to, it's exogenous, right? You would have to draft a law that depends on, the exogenous effects of a network.
How big a barrier then to change is that, do you think?
I think people have very much tried to change Bitcoin. People have very much tried to, alter its fundamental and yet implicit social contracts, and they've all failed. And for me, it's been a lot easier to engage with Bitcoin as something that I simply take as a given, as something that I need to learn myself how it works, rather than something that I create or something that I am part of.
Do you think, David, it's a question of Bitcoin convincing regulators, or other way around? That
I think really that as a market, because it's new, right? I think for the market participants really to engage the regulator, I think that's the first step, and really for us really to tell them, we are creating a new asset class for investor choice. At the end of the day, is that if there's the need in the market, trading needs, investment needs, I'm just providing that the needs of the marketplace.
When that happens, will it then become scalable?
Yes.
Immediately, do you think?
Yes, I think so.
That's the catalyst for change.
Because if we can engage a regulator in a fruitful manner, and then we can get ourselves regulated in a eco-friendly regulatory regime, things will happen. I'm pretty confident of that.
I think Bitcoin doesn't necessarily care what people think of it, and it will continue to grow. However, there are untapped markets, institutional investors who want access, and by the nature of the regimes they operate in, they would have to come in via a regulated entity.
Two of the biggest concerns are hacking and the outage this year. Hacking first, how can you protect your system and your clients against that?
So we take security very, very seriously. All our Bitcoin is stored in cold wallets. All of our Bitcoin is in multi-signature wallets with separate keys held by separate people at all times. And of course, we've got a security team who are world-class who are constantly building our security offensive and defensive measures. With the outage you mentioned, that was ultimately traced to being a DDoS attack by bad actors. Of course, we've mitigated the particular vulnerability or the slowness that they exploited, and we've also recently engaged the services of Cloudflare to help protect us from future attacks similar to that.
Did it impact market share at all, or business?
There was a confluence of events. There was large movements in the Bitcoin price that day, and a lot of our competitors went down. We actually didn't go down during those large movements. We went down or had a couple of hours of outage afterwards due to this DDoS attack. However, as a result of large movements in the price and liquidations, open interests across the board dropped and are now slowly recovering.
Those are two big talking points, Leo, like hacking, outage.
Regarding the security of the coins, BitMEX has a very, very high reputation and very, a lot of trust from the users, and that also, carries the brand a lot. In regards to outages or in regards to availability or even how to properly engage with the retail market, there's been more competition than ever. I think BitMEX, also its very visible success, has inspired a lot of competitors to focus on exactly that, to pivot their products towards margin and futures, and or create new companies that build on top of that, or new companies that try to replicate that product. Ultimately, I think that's great for the market. The Bitcoin trading, OTC, spot, futures, it's more competitive than anything we're seeing in the traditional financial system. And it's very much to the benefit of the user in terms of security, in terms of availability. The pie seems to be getting a lot bigger over the last 2 years. And even if, BitMEX is the one who started with 100% market share, had to take a smaller cut of that pie, it's still a larger cut than it's ever before. And I think those trends are likely to continue. There are going to be more competitors. There's going to be more variety. There's going to be new products being offered, and there's going to be new niches to be discovered. We see in the United States some organizations tapping exclusively the seasoned investors and the institutionalized traders markets, while others are, again, going after the anonymous, un-KYC'd retail market.
It's a matter of education too, and also engaging to be the voice in the marketplace as well, because sometimes that people do not really understand the intricacy of the business that we are running. They just have no idea, right? But if you can really show them that we know exactly what we are doing, and this is the need of the market, and we are satisfying the need of the market with all the risk parameters in the security that we are doing, eventually they'll turn around.
What are your targets to achieve this?
It's a journey, it's a long road. A lot of things need to happen. The whole ecosystem need to eventually evolve. So there are bigger players, global players in the asset management field that is coming in to put more structure and governance in the whole ecosystem. Things will move forward. So we are only one part of it because we are a derivative trading platform for crypto. So we are one part of that ecosystem, but it's very much also a very important part of the ecosystem. But the other part of the ecosystem need to work together so that the digital asset as a class, as a digital asset as an asset class can flourish. It's a journey. You want to say something, Leo?
I think for Bitcoin, it's going to be very much like it will have to prove itself. COVID-19 was currently largely mitigated with massive amounts of dollar printing, massive amount of unprecedented handouts to pretty much everybody. The recovery is not going to come quickly. States are not going to be able to continue their handouts, and they're not going to be able to really catch this massive economic fall that we're about to see. And in that time, a lot of things can happen. We can see hyperinflation, we can see sovereign default, we can see, we might even see hunger again for millions of people in this world that we've successfully eradicated over the last 10 years. And in that climate, I think politics become very volatile and unpredictable. And the one thing Bitcoin can really guarantee over the next year and two is that it's not going to change, in that it has a predictable emission schedule and has a predictable rules for how to open an account, how to settle money. And those are going to be very, very important qualities. So I do believe that the spotlight is eventually going to come onto Bitcoin. And I just hope that in those next 6 to 18 months, we're going to have enough time to, keep working on Bitcoin and, fix a couple of the minor problems that we still have, because it's still a work that's been constantly improved, and it's massively improved over the last 5 years, despite maybe not looking like that. If we want to really bring Bitcoin to the next 10 million people or to 100 million people, then we need new technologies, and we need things like the Lightning Network to be able to efficiently settle small amounts of money between individuals without that being easily taxed or interrupted, or somebody taking the monopolistic effects from that. And I just hope that Bitcoin still has enough time to really get itself sorted before all of the world's attention will be drawn to it, and it will go absolutely ballistic.
That's a great question. And also the environment that we're living in now, low interest rates, high leverage, COVID, everything's going on. Do you feel there's been an impact, good or bad?
I think trading volumes have probably been suppressed due to distraction with more important things in life. But I think Bitcoin will come out stronger as a result of all this, and it will, the printing of the US dollar will just show how fragile these other systems are, and in its place, Bitcoin will be seen as a sign of stability, as a store of value, and a way of transacting without having to worry about defaults.
Very close to your heart, Ben, philanthropy. You might take a step back from BitMEX and focus more on philanthropy going forward. What areas and how are you going to go about that?
So
you're very young.
Well,
36?
I'm 36.
Yeah.
Last year I signed the Giving Pledge, which is run by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Warren Buffett, which is a pledge to give away the majority of your wealth over your lifetime. And I intend to do the most good with my wealth. And so just like I approach business with careful thought and reason and logic, I also approach my philanthropy in the same way. And so using the principles of effective altruism, I'm looking to see how I can achieve the most good, and one of the ways of doing that is to focus on human lives, not just human lives here or in Africa, but human lives between now and in the future. And that if we start looking at some of the existential risks that this planet and humanity and civilization are going to face and mitigate these risks, that's one of the ways of having the biggest impact and ultimately saving the most lives. So I've been looking at a number of areas. 2 years ago I made a grant to the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security to help increase the budget for pandemic preparedness. Of course, this is now very topical with COVID-19, but I've been focusing on ways of reducing the risk of nuclear war, the risks from new bioweapons and biotechnologies, also reducing the risk of unaligned AI, etc., amongst other areas of philanthropy as well. And
would you want to actively be in the research part of that or not? Because
I have
you're going to give it as well. But
so I have a team of advisors and researchers.
Bill Gates is very actively involved, isn't he, in the kind of science of it, if you like.
Yeah, I have a team of researchers and advisors, and I'm effectively a one-man grant-giving organisation in that regard.
Ben, David, Leo, thanks so much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike Walsh, having just heard that panel, interesting comments. I mean, how does it affect what you think your members are going to take away from that? 21 APEC members. Are you more confident, relaxed, as it were, about Bitcoin, or are you more nervous?
I'm actually quite confident with what I've just heard. You know, we put together a great panel of experts, right? You know, some of the founders of the whole sector for the last sort of decade or so. And our members look, you know, they're investor types, they're cautious by fact, you know, just by nature. But they've been asking me as CEO of PBEC to get up to date on the latest on cryptocurrency and exchanges. And BitMEX is a valued member of PBEC as well. So Ben and Arthur, when we can get them like this, and it's just a great opportunity with them rebranding their corporation. So we're very excited for them, but also I think there's more we can be doing together, because the whole point of PBEC is that engagement with government officials around the region from a business independent viewpoint.
Concerns have been are hacking, outage, but really regulation. And I think David's comments would be very interesting for your members.
I think the new chairman, his in-tray will be quite large in terms of what he needs to deal with, but I think they're on the right path. And inside conversation with Ben, he does realise that there's a sort of a leadership role to play now to shape how regulators perceive and regulate going forward, because there's been a lot of shutouts in recent times from different jurisdictions within APEC. And so APEC typically is something done by consensus. So I think if we can get some consensus through our channels at PBEC on behalf of our members, then we're going a long way towards getting that perception right, and especially at the regulator level. How
big a role is Bitcoin, BitMEX playing in your conversations amongst members? Is it getting more of an audience?
Well, PBEC's whole, I guess, focus these days is on the digital trade, and the finance part makes up a large percentage of that, whether it's transactional or raising capital, etc. And so the whole cryptocurrency segment is becoming much more in the spotlight, whether it's for good or for bad, and people want to understand it. And there's, I think, a generational shift, right? You've got the likes of Leo, which we've heard, who seems so passionate and unafraid of it, sort of like embracing it. And then you've got the older generation who are still very skeptical and sort of cautious about all of this. So I do think it's going to take a long road, but in the short term, there's some immediate things that need to be addressed, and we can help with that.
And you're confident, final question, you're confident they can be addressed?
I do. I think, engagement per se, communication
on the
is
right
key.
track.
Yeah. And
with the right people.
With the right people, exactly. I mean, by de facto, these global institutions are very bureaucratic by nature, but they are now turning to the private sector in droves to find solutions to the global problems. And one of the solutions potentially is this new asset class.
Mike Walsh, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.